Hi everyone, Mega Shorts here, bringing you another Black Panther movie Marvel Legends Build-A-Figure M'Baku Wave action figure review, and in this review we're going to be taking a look at what is probably one of the most highly anticipated figures from this wave, and this is the Erik Killmonger figure. Now, we've already seen two variations of Erik Killmonger from the Black Panther movie, both of which had featured him in his Black Panther costume from the final act in the movie, but this one features him in his costume from the second act of the movie, in which he broke Lilicious Claw out of an interrogation, and also when he was taken into custody in Wakanda. Now, like many other collectors, I was really happy to see the figures of him in the Black Panther costume from the final part of the movie, but I was really holding out hope that at some point we were going to get a figure of him in his tactical body armour and military costume from earlier on in the film. And surprisingly, only a few months after the film came out, not even a year since its release, Hasbro gave us this figure. And to be honest, I thought if Hasbro were going to give us a figure of him in this particular costume, it probably wouldn't be for another year or two at least. So it's really great to see that they've seemingly listened to the collectors and given us a figure of him so soon. Now, this particular figure of Erik comes with two gun accessories as well as the tribal mask that he takes from the British Museum quite early on in the film, and it also obviously comes with a piece of the Build-A-Figure M'Baku figure. So before we take a closer look at the figure and its accessories, we're going to take a quick look at the packaging it comes in. So the packaging for this figure is pretty much the same as it is for most of the other figures in this wave. At the top of the front we get the Marvel Legends movie logo. Below that we get the figure and its accessories, including the M'Baku Build-A-Figure piece in a clear plastic bubble. Below that we get the Black Panther movie logo and the name of the figure. On the side we get some nice artwork of Erik from the film wearing the mask, and on the back we get the same picture once again, along with a little bit of info about his character. Below that we get a picture of M'Baku, which is labelled with all the figures and the parts that they come with to make the M'Baku Build-A-Figure. Below that we have the same usual product company information, and that's pretty much it for the packaging. And now we're going to take a closer look at the Erik Killmonger figure. Now, unfortunately, I still haven't got round to getting the other two Marvel Legends figures of Erik Killmonger from this film, so sadly I can't give you a comparison of this figure with the other two at the moment. But given that the costume is completely different to those of the other two figures we've seen of him in the Marvel Legends line, I'm pretty sure it's safe to say that this figure is completely new, aside from the head sculpt, which I think is just exactly the same as the one you get with the Target exclusive Erik Killmonger and Everett Ross figure pack, except there may be a few small paint differences. And just to give you a better idea of the size and scale of this figure, here we have it next to the Infinity War Black Panther figure and the Ulysses Claw figure, both of which are also part of this wave. Now, to be honest, I think the scale of this figure is a little bit off. You can see throughout the movie, especially in the scene where he is in custody in Wakanda, that he is pretty much the same height as Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther. So this figure does seem to be a little bit too tall. Not sure how the other Erik Killmonger figures are in terms of their scaling, but to me, this one just seems a little bit on the tall side. And taking a closer look at the head sculpt, I think Hasbro have absolutely nailed the likeness to Michael B. Jordan for this one. I absolutely love the sculpting of the hair going over the right hand side of his face there, and also the beard has been painted really nicely as well. Sometimes I think action figures don't come with enough facial expressions. Like there's some figures in my collection that I've always felt would have been better with one or two alternate heads with different expressions, but given that Erik Killmonger was a very stern and serious character the whole way through the film, I think it's just fine that they've given us this very serious, determined looking head sculpt. And again, I've got absolutely no faults with this sculpt at all. I think it's absolutely awesome. And once again, I think if there are any differences between this head sculpt and the one in the Target exclusive 2-pack, it will only be very small paint differences. I can't see any from what I've seen on reviews and pictures of that other version that I don't have, but there may be a few there, but probably not enough to make it vastly different. And moving down to the costume now, I'd say this is where the figure definitely shines its best for the paintwork and the sculpting. I think Hasbro have done an amazing job with the chest plate. You can see that both on the front and on the back it's been painted with what I believe is gunmetal grey, and it helps to give it this really realistic look that I'm surprised that they've actually managed to capture so well on a 6-inch figure. I love the shading on it as well. You can see there's quite a lot of it on the back, sort of with dark grey and little bits of black, making it look quite worn and scratched in some places. And the detail around the other features of the costume are really nice as well. You can see that he's got both the yellow straps and also some metallic green straps, which actually have got some really nice sculptured texturing on them as well, even though they are absolutely tiny. And then you've got the silver and black shoulder plates just at the top there. Not really much to say about the shirt. It is just painted with dark blue really, and you can see a tiny bit of it just at the bottom of the chest plate there, but it has got some really nice sculpted creases, especially on the arms down towards the wrists. You can also see that the left arm also has a watch, which is actually a separate piece to the rest of the arm. So if you are going to be swapping the hands of this figure out with any others that you have, just bear in mind that the watch may fall off, and that's something that you don't want to lose really. Then moving down to the lower part of this costume, we can see that he has the utility belt of weapons, which we saw him with during the Ulysses Claw breakout scene. And he didn't actually have this when he was in custody in Wakanda, so I think it is quite nice that they have included this on the figure, as it is a sort of item of detail that Hasbro easily could have just skimmed out on if they were going to base it on how we saw him when he was talking to T'Challa and the other leaders of the tribes in the later part of the movie. So the sculpted detail on this is really nice. You can see that on this side he's got a gun in a holster, which looks to be quite similar to one of the ones you get as a separate accessory. The grenades are also painted green, along with the silver belt buckle going all around it. If you take a close look at it, you can see that there are some really small sculpted lines in the material as well. Then towards the back we get a few more pouches, and one that I think has a knife on the very back there. And you can see that this is actually a separate piece to the rest of the figure as well. It's not actually part of the main sculpt, and that is a little bit frustrating on mine, because unfortunately when I removed mine out of the packaging, it became apparent quite quickly that it was actually already loose. And you can see that it is meant to fasten with a button on this part, which goes into this bit on the back, but unfortunately it just seems to be so tight or so loose on my figure that I can't actually get it to fasten properly, especially with his chest being quite a wide piece. So unfortunately it is just sitting on top of the waist there, which is actually okay, to be honest. When I've had this figure on display with my other Marvel Legends figures, I haven't had a problem with it falling off or anything, and it does sit on this other weapon pouch and his trousers just okay. But I can imagine that if this is a problem all across the board with this particular figure with all other collectors or other people that just buy this figure anyway, that could be a bit problematic. So if you are going to get this figure, just bear in mind the utility belt may be a little bit loose. Then moving down to his trousers now, we can see that these look pretty much just like they did in the film. They're painted with a relatively light brown with some green camouflage painted over the top, and this carries all around them with some really cool sculpted creases. You can see that they go quite baggy just above the boots as well. Then once again, just above the left knee, we get another weapon pouch, which is actually part of the sculpt this time. It's not a removable piece like the utility belt on the waist, and like the main utility belt, it is mostly just painted black with some good sculpted detail all around, but it does have a couple of little green painted pouches as well. Not really much to say about the boots. These are done really nicely, lots of creases on them. They've got the detail of some laces, and they also have the detail of the treads underneath as well, which is really cool. You can also see that he has peg holes under the feet. So even though this figure doesn't have a display stand that it actually comes with, if you do have some others from the Marvel Legends line, you can easily put this figure on top of them. So when it comes to sculpting paint and detail, I think Hasbro have done an amazing job with this figure. The costume itself is just absolutely awesome. Again, that chest piece looks absolutely fantastic with the gunmetal grey and all the paintwork they've put on it, especially on the back there where it looks quite worn and quite well used. Even just the sculpted detail of the creases all around the shirt and the trousers make it look great. And they've really put a lot of attention to detail within the things like the straps around the chest piece and the utility belt. It all just looks absolutely fantastic, and to be honest, I don't think a figure of Erik Killmonger in this costume, in this scale, could really look much better than this one could, especially with that fantastic head sculpt with that likeness to Michael B. Jordan, which probably wouldn't be so brilliant were it not for the recent face printing technology that Hasbro have started using for the live action Marvel Legends figures. Now, the articulation on this figure isn't quite the same as that of the other Erik Killmonger Marvel Legends figures. He doesn't have the butterfly joints at the shoulders, so you can't quite get as much motion out of the arms, but that's understandable because of the chest piece and the shoulder pads, which probably would have made butterfly joints seriously hard to utilise on this figure, and to be honest, I'm glad that they have just given us the more usual arm articulation for this figure. As far as I'm aware, all the other points of articulation that you get on the other variations are there. It's just obviously there's a slight bit less for the arm movement. So the head is on a ball hinge, and you can get him to look pretty much all the way up, which is absolutely awesome. There's quite a few other Marvel Legends figures out there from recent years, especially in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that sadly can't even get about there in their head movement. So it's really good that with that hinge you can get him to look all the way up. You can also move the head down a little bit as well, and it can turn pretty much all the way around as well. The arms have ball jointed shoulders, again, not butterfly joints, so even though you can't get the sort of backwards and forwards movement from the shoulders like you can with those, you can still get the arms to move out a little bit from there, although they are quite stiff on my figure at the moment, so just keep that in mind if you are going to get this figure. The arms can also move to about there from the shoulders because they do have the shoulder pads. Probably if you move them out a little bit, yep, you can get them all the way around as well. Not that they really need to though. The arms also have the usual swivel joints, so they can turn all the way around from there. You get double jointed elbows, so they can move up and down like so from there. The hands have the usual swivel joints as well as hinges at the wrist where they can move inwards and outwards. You also get a very nicely hidden ab joint just above the waist where you can move the figure backwards and forwards on there, which is quite good if you've got Black Panther giving him a kick. You can sort of pose him as if he's just taking a hit to the chest there. The waist also has a joint where it can move only slightly. Surprisingly, it doesn't seem to be able to go all the way around, but again, doesn't really need to. The legs can move backwards and forwards from there, pretty much that much. They also have hinge joints where they can move outwards to the sides. Both legs also have swivel joints, although on the left leg you just have to be careful with the weapon pad. They have the usual double jointed knees where they can move outwards and inwards quite nicely from there, and the feet also have a angle pivot and hinge. And before I deliver my final thoughts on this figure, we're just going to take a look at the accessories he comes with, starting with the mask that he takes from the British Museum. Now, to be honest, if someone came to me a few months ago and said that we were going to be getting a figure of Erik Killmonger in this costume, I would have thought if we were going to get the mask, it would have been on a swappable head. But for this figure, it's actually a removable feature, which is really cool, actually. I don't think I've ever actually seen this with any Marvel Legends figures, and it does sit on the head sculpt really nicely. I've not had any problems with it falling off when I've been reposing the figure at all, and you can even pose the head without it falling off either, which is really cool. And the sculpted detail on it is really nice. You can see that around the front it's got pretty much all the little features and detail that it had in the film, as well as some really nice paintwork with the pink fading into the green, as well as the brown or yellow just below both the eyes as well. You can see some sculpted quite pointy ears along the sides as well, and the fur along the back has been done really well. It's got a sort of light brown wash over the top, quite faded, gives the mask that really ancient look, and I love the way it's been sculpted with all the little bits sticking out along the sides, around the top and onto the other side as well. The horns are quite cool as well. You can see that they've got some what look like sculpted holes in them, as well as some lines, and they've also been given a slight brown wash over the top, making them look quite old and worn. And my one gripe with this head sculpt, really, or the mask even, is that it's just that the fur isn't painted on the back really. It's still got the sculpted detail, but it's just been painted green rather than the brown that it has on the front. And also, unlike in the film, it doesn't have the strap that goes around the back of Erik's head when he's wearing it. But I can understand that, because obviously in order to make it a removable accessory, you can't put something that would get in the way of the main part of the head sculpt. So I'm totally fine with that. I mean, they could have given it to us as a swappable head sculpt with the strap going on the back, but I actually really like the fact they've done it as a removable piece, because it's quite a nice new option I've never seen with the Marvel Cinematic Universe Marvel Legends, and it is great if you do stop motion animations with the figure. You can literally have him animated to put on the mask. And yeah, so from me, this mask gets a very well earned 4 out of 5. The sculpting of it is absolutely fantastic. Really like the detail and the paintwork. It's just my main small problem with it is just how the fur hasn't been painted on the back. And then taking a look at the gun accessories now, we can see that this is the one that he uses to shoot Black Panther in the Ulysses Claw breakout scene. This is really nicely done in terms of the sculpting. Not really much to say about the paintwork, because it's all just one solid black throughout, just like the other gun. But it has got brilliant sculpted detail going right from the front to the back. And it does sit in Erik's hands really nicely as well. You can get him to just hold it in his right hand like that. But if you want him to pose with it in the more realistic holding pose for a larger weapon like this, you can get him to hold it in his left hand together as well. Normally with a larger gun accessory like this, I'd try to get the left hand underneath the front part of the barrel there, but for this figure it has been a bit difficult to get the sculpt to sort of bend out a bit to hold the gun underneath there. So for now I've just been putting the thumb through that little part there, just at the back part of that barrel. So even though it is a little bit difficult to get it into the spot on pose, you can still get him to hold this particular gun quite well. And then for the last accessory, we have the smaller of the two guns, and I think this is the one that he uses in his final scene with Ulysses Claw. Not really much to say about the paintwork again, because it is all just one solid black, but it does look really accurate with all of its sculpted detail, and I really like the sculpted scales that it's got just near the trigger there, and it also does fit into his right hand very nicely as well. So overall, I think the Black Panther movie Marvel Legends M'Baku Wave Erik Killmonger figure is an awesome addition to my Marvel Cinematic Universe figure collection. I'd say this is easily one of Hasbro's best MCU villain figures to date, and I'm really grateful that they have given us this version of him as well, rather than just the figures of him in the Black Panther costume from the final battle, which were cool. I was happy to see that they were being made, but like many other collectors, this was one that I really wanted. So I'm really pleased to see that we finally have it, and it's turned out absolutely awesome. Again, the likeness to Michael B. Jordan is absolutely spot on. I have no problems with that head sculpt whatsoever. I think the costume has turned out really well in both the sculpt and the paintwork. Absolutely love the way that chest plate has turned out. Looks really, really realistic. And the articulation is pretty good as well. You might not get as much from it as you do with the other Erik Killmonger figures, but I can see why it doesn't have so many joints as the other versions, so that's absolutely no problem from me. My only issues from this figure come from the scaling, in that I do think this figure is a little bit too tall, especially when put against the Black Panther figures and the T'Challa figures. And also, I would have liked it a little bit more if the utility belt had an empty holster for the small gun accessory, because you can see on the right hand side that it does seem to have the same small gun in one of the holsters as part of the sculpt, and it seems like a missed opportunity for them to have not made it empty so that you could actually store it as part of the figure, which has been the case with a lot of Marvel Legends figures in the past, but sadly that doesn't really seem to be happening much anymore, and it would have been a nice opportunity to actually keep the accessory on the figure rather than having it to put it somewhere else really. So even though I do have some small issues with this figure, I'm still really, really happy with it. And if you're a collector that doesn't buy entire waves and just likes to sort of cherry pick the best Marvel Legends out there, I'd say this is definitely one to get if you collect some of the movie figures, as I can imagine that in a couple of years' time or a few years down the line, this will become a figure that's quite highly sought after and hard to find, much like the Walmart exclusive Loki figure from the first Avengers movie a few years ago. So from me, the M'Baku Wave Erik Killmonger figure gets a very well a 9 out of 10. A absolutely awesome figure that I'm really happy to see as part of the MCU figure line. It's great to see Hasbro stepping up their game in the villain figures. They're not just giving us figures of the main villains in their main costumes, but they're also doing figures of them in different costumes as well, which is brilliant. Definitely makes me hopeful for more variants of some of the other villains that we've already got as part of the MCU line in the past. And again, only have a couple of issues with the scaling and the utility belt, but other than that, this is a really, really awesome figure that I'd highly recommend if you've not got it already. So yeah, that is pretty much it for my review of the Marvel Legends Erik Killmonger figure from the M'Baku Wave. Hope you've all enjoyed watching this review. If you want to share your thoughts on this figure, you can do so in the comment section below. I'm thinking of my next review of a figure from this wave being of the T'Chaka figure. And yeah, thanks for watching this review, guys, and I will see you again soon.